I think I brought this up every review so far for Season 3. The House of the Dragon reminds me a lot of Game of Thrones Season 6. For every good thing it does, the writers also make an utterly brain-dead decision. I think Episode 4 highlights this, the best of the 4 episodes we've seen so far. Yes, it's an enjoyable show to watch, especially if you turn off that book reader part of your brain. But it also does have some issues that are fair to highlight. A lot of the online discussion I've seen about this episode have called it boring, and a step down from the last 3 weeks. Not bad, but not great either. Now, my take on this is that even Game of Thrones at its very peak of quality had these kinds of episodes where it was sort of transitional. We get lots of setup and exposition needed to allow for the next big story beat or battle. If you don't have these kinds of episodes, the character development feels unearned, and the big battles lack any stakes. So while these aren't everyone's favourite type of episodes, which I can understand, there are reasons why they need to happen. Bearing that in mind, while I think there are some valid reasons for the writing and pacing for this episode, there are some issues still with the creative choices. I know it's really silly, but I love this opening shot that we get of a law-accurate Tumbleton on the banks of the Mander. It's clear from the get-go this arrangement with the Hightower men living with Hugh's wife's family isn't going to end well, thanks to the immediate antagonistic attitude of the soldiers. I know a lot of fans were not keen on how Ryan Condal is portraying the Hightower army, and I have to admit it does always seem to be the Green troops and the Green faction who behave poorly. And we've not really seen that with the Blacks that much. But the reality is in these large-scale wars, all sides are not saints. So I would like to see some black pillaging, if that makes sense. Game of Thrones handled this very well, and in the early seasons showed you how bad the Lannister men, as well as the Stark men, were in the Riverlands. Now, no side of it comes out clean, and I do wonder if House of the Dragon will try and do the same thing. I really like what they're doing with Ormund Hightower. He's very much a blank slate of a character in the book, and I like the fact they've looked into the lore of House Hightower and its close connection with the Citadel and the Faith when fleshing out his character. While he certainly has his quirks and, well, rage, I can see the Hightower in him. I'm still unsure if Daeron's brown hair is real or dyed. I don't know, given Ormund's anti-Targaryen sentiment. It wouldn't surprise me if he did make Daeron dye his hair. Daeron too seems to be a very interesting character. It's not the Daeron we know from the book, but I think it was very clear given that they've introduced him in Season 3. The show and book Daeron were going to be very different people. It's a shame we never got the Battle of the Honeywine though. I'm not going to bother comparing Ormund and Daeron to their book counterparts, because it is very clear the show is doing its own thing here. But so far I am actually enjoying this element of the show, even if the Tumbleton plot is confusing me in terms of how they move the story forward in line with the broader arc of the book. I love how Rhaenyra is utterly taken aback by Ormund. This is a player in the game she doesn't know and doesn't see coming. I think we're starting to see shadows of book Rhaenyra here. Don't think the show's going to go full on book Rhaenyra, but they will get some way there. You can see the Daeron plot has shaken her confidence, and maybe is the seed of growing paranoia. The Maelor return line really did stand out to me, given how in Fire and Blood one of the names given to Rhaenyra by the Smallfolk and lords alike is Maelor with teats. I'm not sure if we are going to get that in the show, maybe as Rhaenyra gets more paranoid and erratic as the season goes on. Some actions might earn her that nickname. This may just be an Easter egg for book fans. Now, I've been very outspoken about how I'm bored of these tiresome Rhaenyra and Alicent scenes. However, I did really enjoy this one because it actually meant something and had some real character development for Alicent. Fostering her children, especially a third son away, is a very common thing in Westeros. It seems Daeron was sent to Ormund very young, hence why Ormund is a father-like figure. It seems like he may not even remember his mother or siblings. So Alicent wanting to send him to Old Town because she wanted one of her children to be a Hightower makes a lot of sense, especially if she become aware of the kind of people both Aemond and Aegon were becoming. If his hair is also naturally brown, then it makes him even more of a Hightower. I hope this ends the debate of people calling Aegon, Aemond and Helaena Hightowers. They are very much Targaryens, not just genetically, but in the manner they were brought up. This is a Targaryen civil war, not Targaryen versus Hightower. Yes, House Hightower is who makes up the bulk of the Green's power, but it's still a Targaryen versus Targaryen war, no matter how much you try and discredit the Targaryen aspects of Aegon, Aemond and Helaena. They're just as Targaryen as Rhaenyra and Daemon. Alicent sent Daeron away because she wanted him to be something different, to be un-Targaryen. This scene also works as a huge exposition dump, given at this stage we know very little about Ormund. Corlys riding off to deal with the raiders makes a lot of sense in the context of the show, but it does beg the question, given Rhaenyra's refusal to legitimise Addam and Alyn, how do we keep Corlys' story arc in line with the wider story in the book? I don't see anything happening that's going to change Rhaenyra's mind about the legitimisation. My theory is the legitimisation might happen via a very different means during the Hour of the Wolf. The scene with Aegon and a comatose Sunfyre was brilliant. It's said in Fire and Blood that Aegon and Sunfyre had a really deep bond, which we saw a bit of during Season 2, but we really do see it here. Tom Glencarny really stole the show, and for what it's worth, no, I don't think Sunfyre is dead, as too much of the book plot would change beyond repair. It's clear they're setting up Sunfyre as this Chekhov's gun, and I think Sunfyre's recovery is supposed to mirror Aegon rediscovering himself this season. Also, look at the corpse of Aelys, a dragon whom died at Rook's Rest, decayed and rotting. Sunfyre, on the other hand, while looking worse for wear, still looks in okay shape in comparison. Harrenhal has me confused. They've gone well off the book plot, but haven't at the same time. In some ways, Gwaine has taken both Aemon and Cole's place in Criston's storyline, while Criston Cole retains some of his role, and some of Aemon's as well. I'm really not sure what they're doing with Alys and Aemond at this point. We know as book readers where it needs to go, but I think what Ryan Condal has done is to save time and get into the meat of Aemond and Alys's story. He's expedited Criston Cole's Harrenhal plot. It's an interesting change and one I need to see play out with more context before I judge it. The reason I say Criston's taken some of Aemon's role and Gwaine some of Cole's is in the book it's Criston Cole who wants to march on Tumbleton and Aemond who wants to stay and fight in the Riverlands, where now we have Cole wanting to stay and fight and Gwaine wanting to march south. What's also interesting is in the book, as Criston marches south, he's constantly ambushed and harried by the Rivermen, where it seems that in the show, Cole will be the one doing the ambushes and the harrying. It's really going to change the context of the Butcher's Ball. I suspect the show version is going to be very different. I think Cole in the show reminds me a lot of main book characters such as Jaime Lannister to some extent, but more so Arys Oakhart, who seems to share a lot of the same inner conflicts and turmoil as the show version of Criston Cole. I think it's fair to say at this point, book and show Cole are very different people. Show Cole has very much turned into a nihilist along the way, and we see this broken man who wants to regain his lost honour. It's nice to see Alyn and Rhaenyra interacting, and does give me hope she will legitimise him at some point. It's also nice to see Viserys as Lego once again, and gain insight into the kind of ruler Rhaenyra wants to be, the lessons she may have learned from Viserys. The question is, did she learn the right lessons from him? It also seems they've given Otto's cats for the mice idea to Alyn, which does make sense given they really did use cats on ships to catch mice. Some large vessels still do this today. Now, I've seen a lot of fans roll their eyes at this show original Rook's Rest arc for Aegon, and I admit I was a bit baffled by it at first. I get why they needed something for Aegon to do this season, but I was not sold on this idea. Then, when I saw Tom Tangletongue, it just clicked for me. Given how different Dragonstone is in the show compared to the book, with it not having the villages or the port like in the book, it means that they have to change Aegon's arc to account for that. His storyline just doesn't make sense with the show version of Dragonstone. There are people involved in his arc, like Tom, who simply cannot exist on show Dragonstone. Thus, elements of Aegon's arc that do take place on Dragonstone need to be done on the mainland. Yeah, the Dragonstone arc is still going to be very different because of how, well, different Dragonstone is, but they've managed to keep some semblance of it intact. I can see Tom and Aegon forming a bit of a wholesome bond as the season goes on. I suspect he might be one of the few meaningful characters to make it out of Rook's Rest. Now, I think I've spoken about the concept of the troops in Tumbleton enough already, but what I will say is this. It's clear Hugh's wife, or whatever's going to happen to her, is going to have a huge impact on the story here. But at this point, given how far removed from the books we are, I can't fathom what they're doing with Tumbleton. Now, spoiler alert here for any lost non-book readers who don't want any spoilers. But if Hugh's going to play a role in what happens at Tumbleton, with his wife likely dying as a result of the battle, how do you make sense of Hugh switching sides? As it stands, it makes no sense why Hugh would flip green, unless it's something the Blacks do that inadvertently kills his wife. So with all the changes, I'm struggling to make sense with what they intend to do with Hugh. Being a turncloak doesn't seem to be in his character, so maybe he just freaks out at Tumbleton and just goes Team Hugh rather than outwardly joining the Greens. It's all going to go down to how they handle the battle. Now, the Queen of Bastards graffiti is interesting, because it really does seem like they are sowing the seeds this episode of Rhaenyra's arc. We have her slowly becoming more paranoid throughout the season, something that's only going to get worse now we have this, which while it could just be Green supporters, does lay some groundwork for Smallfolk unrest. What I like here is it has double meaning, referring to Rhaenyra's children with Harwin Strong, and the fact most of her dragon riders are actually dragon seeds. She's the Queen of Bastards. I'm just going to jump forward now to Rhaenyra learning of this and her reaction. Once again, she seems to be letting her pride cloud her judgment. She orders the Goldcloaks to deal with it without really considering what that means. The Goldcloaks are over-enthusiastic in the task, pulling random people out of their homes and using this as an excuse for violence, just like they always used to under the command of Daemon. This is not a good look for Rhaenyra. The actions of the Goldcloaks reflect directly on her. This is the kind of thing that will lose you the support of the Smallfolk, who will talk and spread tales of you. What I love about the scene with Ulf in the tavern is something I really never considered before about his character, is these men and women are his found family. Thus Rhaenyra's utter contempt and disinterest in Ulf's request for favours for them will hurt Ulf deeply to the core. So far, we've had 2 instances of Rhaenyra inadvertently looking down on Ulf. When he asked for the name Targaryen, well, she obviously couldn't do that, does belittle him. While she does have a point about the risk of him being in the taverns, she doesn't understand what she's asking of him, taking him away from his friends, his found family, and frankly, everything he's ever known in life. It's clear that this is supposed to set up Ulf's turn. I think the show's done a good job here at fleshing him out, and giving him much more motivation to do so than the book version. The scene where Ormund casts judgment on the man who assaults Hugh's wife is very telling about his character, because in this case, justice is done. The man has committed a crime that goes against the very faith Ormund and House Hightower hold so dear. It's also, for the time being, buying him some good PR from the Footleys, and well, the folk of Tumbleton. For now. Ormund is a complex man, and has a very black and white view of crime and justice. We will come back to this point later. I don't really have much to say about the eerie scene with Daemon, but I do love Jeyne Arryn. I've loved her each time we've seen her this season, and between Jeyne and Torrhen Manderley, it's really making me want to see a Regency-era spin-off with this cast. It would be interesting, seeing the realm being ruled by mostly non-Targaryen people. It's also interesting that Caraxes doesn't listen to Daemon here, and is another case of House the Dragon going with this idea that dragons do still have some elements of free will when bonded, and that Targaryens only have so much control over them. I really don't know what to make of Rhaena taking Nettles' role at this point now. I'm enjoying it more than I thought I would, thanks to really the performance, but I really don't know how they're going to get Rhaena back in line with her book role, as minor as it is. Are they really going to give her all of Nettles' arc, including running away and living in the Vale as a fire witch? Or will they try and find a way of bringing her back in line with the book? And I'm still baffled about what they're going to do with Aegon the Younger and Viserys. It's such an important hinge point in the story, and really the whole lore of House Targaryen. I'm really loving James Norton as Ormond. The way Daeron knows this outburst is about to happen and clears the room says a lot about Ormond's character. But this kind of anger is common. I can't help but get Dennis Reynolds vibes from Ormond, and maybe that was actually the intent here, because it can't be a coincidence. I don't really have much to say about the kissing in the foot scene. I know it's caused a lot of outrage in some areas of the fanbase, but it doesn't bother me too much. They're clearly just trying to humble and motivate Aegon for his rise. But yeah, maybe they are being a bit heavy-handed on the humiliation side of it. I think Daemon giving Rhaenyra the fake burned skull is going to be vital. Is she going to find out Daemon lied? And this, with Daemon being her husband, maybe the only man she trusts, betraying her like this will really stoke that paranoia that's developing. It's clear that Mysaria knows. and I do think she's going to try and use this. I'm not sure what for, because in the show it's not clear what her end goal is, but in terms of Rhaenyra's character, this is going to be important. I suspect Rhaena might show back up and try and do something to redeem herself. Perhaps Aegon and Viserys are going to get attacked by the Triarchy fleet, and rather than have Aegon fly away on Stormcloud, Rhaena will rescue him, fly him back to King's Landing, where of course then it's exposed that Daemon lied. And then we have this dilemma for Rhaenyra, where Rhaena was responsible for one son's death, but also saved another. Helaena is pregnant. We will be getting some version of Maelor Targaryen, and I have no idea how this is going to work. What's the timeline? How pregnant is she? It does look like from the trailer she will be giving birth, but given how far along she appears to be this episode, there has to be some massive time jump, and very soon, given where we currently are in Helena's story and the story of the dance altogether. I have no idea why they're trying to introduce Maelor now. I'm not sure what they have planned, and I'm very interested to find out if this was always the plan, or if they pivoted after George R. R. Martin's Toxic Butterflies blog post. The fact this happened so late into the show maybe suggests the latter. One thing I will say for sure, there is no way, if we are getting Maelor, that we will be getting his book story or Bitterbridge. They're going to do something very different with him. I don't think he will be long for the world, if he even survives birth at all. But yeah, Condal, you have my attention. What are you going to do here? This is either going to be an utter mess or excellent. Flip a coin, you get your answer. I love Daeron's bond with Tessarion. It seems the only part of his Targaryen identity he really has any ownership of. Ormund very much sees Daeron's Targaryenness as a plague, and very much has tried to mould Daeron into the Hightower way, faithful and pious. It does seem like an odd choice, given how vital House Hightower were in getting the faith to accept the doctrine of exemptionalism, but I guess this is a very different Lord Hightower than the era of Jaehaerys. The line about Daeron's blood being tainted was fantastic. By having Daeron kill Hugh's brother-in-law, is Ormund trying to teach Daeron the concept of king's justice? Is he trying to mould Daeron into his view of justice? Having Ormund's goals be placing Daeron on the throne also makes sense. They think Aegon's dead, Aemond is MIA, so Daeron does have a strong claim, given Maelor's not actually born. He would be a Targaryen in name, but a Hightower king in truth. What's ironic is Alicent sent him to Oldtown so she had one Hightower child, yet that good intent has seemingly backfired. He is a Hightower, or Ormund is making him one, but not in the good way Alicent wanted. Now again, punishing Hugh's brother-in-law does make sense with Ormund's character. Yes, the soldier needed to be punished for the affront to the faith, but Hugh's brother struck a man of House Hightower, whom is an extension of House Hightower itself. So yeah, I can see Ormund's weird logic here, even if they are counteractive to each other. He seems to be a man with a very firm grasp of his own worldview. I liked this episode a lot more than I thought I would when I heard the early access reviews. It is a classic plot building exposition episode, and that's okay. Even at Game of Thrones' peak in season 2 and 3, they needed episodes like this for the story to work. There wasn't much action, which I know some fans hate, but for me, I tend to like these slower paced episodes. I think there is still some huge issues with the writing, or more so the choices they made in terms of the changes from the plot from the book, and how I'm still struggling to picture what they're going for in the endgame here, such as Rhaenyra's nettles, Maelor, Hugh's motivation. I think they've planted some seeds this week, and depending on how these seeds grow over the season will impact how I view this episode in retrospect. Right now, I think 7 out of 10 is a fair score. This whole season so far averaging a 7. But come the end of the season, depending on what happens, the 7 for this episode might slip down or up, depending on where they go with the stuff they laid the groundwork for